In a highly anticipated commencement address at the United States Military Academy at West Point, President Donald Trump celebrated the achievements of the graduating class while simultaneously highlighting the significant changes his administration has made to military policy and education. This year's address took place against the backdrop of a broader crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives within military academies, a move that has sparked both support and dissent among service members and educators. Trump, donning his signature red "Make America Great Again," had called the graduates winners and proclaimed them the first to graduate during what he described as a golden age for the U.S. military. "Each of you is entering the officer corps at a defining moment in the Army's history," he emphasized, underscoring his administration's commitment to national security and the ongoing development of advanced military technologies, including the newly announced Golden Dome missile defense system, which he vowed would be completed before he leaves office. In a speech that revisited themes of patriotism, strength, and leadership, Trump took aim at his predecessors, particularly former President Joe Biden, accusing them of failing to respect military traditions and values. "For at least 2 decades, political leaders from both parties have dragged our military into missions it was never meant to be," he asserted, criticizing past engagements that he claimed led to the unnecessary deployment of soldiers in foreign nations. A significant portion of Trump's address focused on the administration's policies regarding DEI programs, which have undergone sweeping changes since he took office. "We have liberated our troops from divisive and demeaning political trainings," he declared, pledging an end to what he referred to as critical race theory or transgender for everybody forced onto the brave men and women in uniform. This rhetoric aligns with recent actions taken by the Department of Defense, which have included the disbanding of several student clubs at West Point that focused on race and gender. Critics of these measures, including former educators from West Point, argue that such initiatives were vital for fostering an inclusive environment and that the administration's actions represent a dangerous trend toward indoctrination rather than education. "These were brazen demands to indoctrinate, not educate," remarked Graham Parsons, a former West Point professor who emphasized the importance of engaging with controversial ideas rather than dismissing them outright. In a notable contrast, the event saw protests both outside the West Point gates and on the Hudson River, where demonstrators expressed their discontent with the administration's policies. Nevertheless, the ceremony proceeded without incident, with Trump encouraging graduates to think big and pursue their passions as they embark on their military careers. Looking ahead, the Trump administration continues to emphasize its alignment with military values and the importance of high recruitment numbers, paralleling broader efforts to reinforce American patriotism. An upcoming parade in Washington, D.C. is set to honor service members as part of the country's 250th birthday celebration, showcasing the legacy of the U.S. Army. As the administration navigates these controversial changes within military education and training, the long-term implications for the armed forces remain to be seen. With a polarized public discourse surrounding DEI initiatives and military policy, the future of military training and the ideological foundation of U.S. military academies will likely continue to evolve amid ongoing political scrutiny. In a dramatic escalation of his administration's trade policies, President Donald Trump has broadened his tariff threats to include major tech companies such as Apple and international trade partners like the European Union. In a series of posts on Truth Social, Trump announced intentions to impose a hefty 25% tariff on non-US made iPhones, while also advocating for a blanket 50% tariff on products imported from the EU effective June 1, 2025. This move marks a significant intensification of the ongoing trade conflict that has been a hallmark of Trump's presidency. Trump's warning to Apple CEO Tim Cook was particularly pointed. "I have long ago informed Tim Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhones that will be sold in the United States of America will be manufactured and built in the United States, not India or any place else," he stated. The implication is clear: failure to comply would result in substantial tariffs that could drastically increase the cost of iPhones sold in the U.S. market. Following this announcement, Apple's stock experienced a notable decline, losing over $100 billion in market capitalization. A stark reminder of the financial vulnerability that comes with geopolitical tensions. The rationale behind Trump's aggressive tariff strategy appears rooted in a desire to pressure U.S. corporations into reshoring manufacturing jobs to America. "If they're going to sell it in America, I want it to be built in the United States," he reiterated, extending the potential tariff threat not only to Apple but also to competitors like Samsung. This broad approach suggests an administration keen on using tariffs as leverage to reshape manufacturing landscapes, though it raises questions about the legality and feasibility of targeting specific companies directly. As the trade war heats up, negotiations with the EU have soured, with Trump characterizing their discussions as going nowhere. The EU, already bracing for potential backlash, has reportedly prepared $108 billion in retaliatory tariffs if the situation deteriorates further. European leaders, however, have urged calm, suggesting that they are assessing their options in response to Trump's aggressive posturing. In the context of these developments, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has attempted to reassure markets, indicating that the administration plans to announce several significant trade deals in the coming weeks. This statement comes amid ongoing discussions between the U.S. and China, where officials are seeking to maintain lines of communication despite recent tensions over semiconductor exports. Such diplomatic engagements underscore the complexity of the global trading landscape, where multiple nations are caught in a web of escalating tariffs and retaliatory measures. The impact of these tariffs is already being felt across various sectors. Major retailers have begun voicing concerns about potential price hikes due to increased costs associated with tariffs. For instance, Walmart's CEO highlighted the challenges of navigating tariff impacts while maintaining competitive pricing, a sentiment echoed by other executives across the industry. This environment of uncertainty is forcing companies to rethink their pricing strategies and supply chain logistics as they grapple with the reality of increased operational costs amidst a turbulent economic climate. As the situation unfolds, the ramifications of Trump's tariff threats will likely extend beyond immediate financial markets. Economists warn that rising costs could lead to inflationary pressures and disrupt supply chains, echoing concerns voiced by industry leaders about the long-term sustainability of such trade practices. The prospect of a continued trade war raises significant questions about the future of international trade relations, particularly for countries caught in the crossfire between the U.S. and its trading partners. In conclusion, while President Trump's recent tariff threats signify a bold move in his trade strategy, the potential consequences for both American consumers and global markets remain to be seen. As negotiations continue and the deadline for new tariffs approaches, stakeholders across industries will be watching closely to gauge the next steps in this ongoing trade saga. The landscape of international trade is poised for significant shifts, and the responses from major corporations and foreign governments will undoubtedly shape the future of economic relations in an increasingly interconnected world. In a week marked by significant political maneuvering and economic uncertainty, President Trump has ignited fresh concerns with his recent tariff threats and budgetary decisions. His administration's strategies, particularly regarding trade and fiscal policy, are testing the limits of both domestic and international confidence in the U.S. economy. On Thursday, the House narrowly approved a budget package that, while touted as a means to stimulate growth, threatens to exacerbate the national deficit, with projections indicating an increase of $3.3 trillion over the next decade. The legislation passed with a slim majority of 215 to 214, a feat largely attributed to President Trump's personal intervention. His pressure tactics included threats to challenge dissenting Republicans in upcoming primaries, showcasing his willingness to override party resistance to achieve his agenda. The approval of this budget comes at a precarious time as Trump shifts his focus back to tariffs. Following a period of relative calm in trade relations with China and the European Union, the president has threatened to impose a staggering 50% tariff on goods imported from the EU effective next week. This abrupt shift aligns with Trump's pattern of leveraging aggressive trade policies as a means to negotiate better terms, though many economists warn that such tactics could destabilize global markets and lead to increased prices for American consumers. Ron Elving is senior political analyst. highlights that Trump's aggressive stance may stem from stalled trade negotiations with the EU. Trade talks with the EU were going nowhere, Elving noted, suggesting that Trump's latest threats are a strategic pivot from negotiation to confrontation. This tactic also extends to major corporations, with Apple being singled out for a potential 25% tariff on iPhones unless production is moved to the US. Such measures raise questions about the administration's ability to dictate manufacturing practices to private companies. Market reactions to these developments have been swift and negative. Following Trump's tariff announcements, the S&P 500 fell nearly 1%, reflecting investor apprehension about the implications of renewed trade hostilities. Financial analysts warn that these tariffs could lead to higher costs for consumers and businesses alike, with major retailers like Walmart indicating that they may have to pass on these costs to shoppers. The economic outlook is further muddied by persistent warnings regarding the potential fallout from Trump's fiscal policies. Experts emphasize that the combination of expansive tax cuts and increasing tariffs could lead to higher inflation and borrowing costs, complicating the Federal Reserve's ability to manage monetary policy effectively. As the Fed grapples with conflicting signals, rising prices against the backdrop of slowing growth, it finds itself in a precarious position, forced to navigate an uncertain economic landscape. Despite the alarm bells, the Trump administration remains optimistic. Stephen Miron, chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisers, insists that the economic benefits of tax cuts will materialize over time, dismissing critiques as overblown. Yet many economists remain skeptical, noting that the current trajectory could hurt the poorest Americans while failing to deliver significant growth. As the administration continues to execute its economic strategy, the divergence between Trump's optimistic projections and the growing concerns from businesses and economists illustrates a critical tension. The unfolding situation not only raises questions about the sustainability of Trump's economic policies but also about their long-term ramifications on U.S. standing in the global market. Looking ahead, the next few weeks will be crucial. With the Senate poised to take up the budget bill and the ongoing tariff discussions, the administration's ability to stabilize both the economy and its political support will be put to the test. The outcomes of these developments will likely shape the economic landscape and political climate in significant ways. As both supporters and critics of Trump's policies brace for the potential fallout, the economic landscape in the United States is currently marked by significant uncertainty as President Donald Trump pivots from tax cuts to aggressive tariff threats. Following the recent approval of a substantial tax cut package by House Republicans which unsettled financial markets, Trump announced sweeping tariff increases that have further exacerbated investor anxiety and raised the prospect of higher consumer prices. This dual strategy has left many economists questioning the sustainability of Trump's economic policies, which are increasingly perceived as risky. Despite an agenda that aims to stimulate growth through tax cuts and deregulation, critics argue that Trump's approach could worsen the national debt, disproportionately impact low-income families, and yield far less economic growth than his administration claims. Financial markets have responded with skepticism, as evidenced by a recent spike in yields on long-term government bonds, signaling that investors are demanding higher premiums to offset perceived risks. Washington has thrown down the gauntlet to the bond market, noted Mark Dowding, chief investment officer at RBC Blue Bay Asset Management, highlighting the tension between the administration's fiscal ambitions and the realities of market confidence. In a dramatic move, Trump threatened to impose a staggering 50% tariff on imports from the European Union and a 25% tariff on products from Apple, among other tech companies. This escalation in trade tensions comes at a time when the economy shows signs of strain, with experts warning that such tariff policies could lead to inflationary pressures and a potential slowdown. Major retailers like Walmart have indicated that they may need to raise prices due to the additional costs associated with the tariffs, further burdening consumers already facing elevated prices. While the White House has touted the potential for its tax cuts to boost U.S. output significantly, many economists are more cautious. The Joint Committee on Taxation has estimated that the package could add over $3 trillion to the national debt with scant evidence to support the administration's claims of robust growth. In fact, the nonpartisan Pan-Wharton budget model predicts that many low-income families could see their financial situations worsen, potentially losing access to crucial federal aid programs. Stephen Miron, chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisers, remains optimistic, asserting that the administration's agenda will ultimately benefit the economy. "I think folks have cried wolf a lot," he remarked, defending the administration's position amid a barrage of critical economic forecasts. However, the overwhelming sentiment from investors and analysts contrasts sharply with this optimism, suggesting a growing consensus that Trump's economic policies may not yield the intended results. The precarious nature of the current economic climate is further complicated by the Federal Reserve's challenging position. Faced with conflicting pressures of rising inflation and the need to support a faltering economy, Fed officials find themselves at a crossroads. Austin Goolsbee, president of the Chicago Fed, emphasized the need for clarity in policymaking before the Fed can take decisive action, reflecting the broader uncertainty that businesses face as they navigate an unpredictable landscape. As Trump continues to advocate for his economic vision, the ramifications of his policies are likely to unfold in the coming months. The combination of tax cuts, tariffs, and rising national debt will challenge not only the U.S. economy but also have ripple effects globally, as the U.S. bond market serves as a critical benchmark for international investors. With the specter of inflation looming and growth forecasts dimming, the administration will need to reconcile its ambitious agenda with the hard realities presented by financial markets and economic data. As we look ahead, the potential for a prolonged economic slowdown raises critical questions about the efficacy of Trump's strategies and the overall health of the American economy. In a bold move that underscores the Trump administration's commitment to a robust national defense, President Donald Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 FY 2026 defense budget allocates a staggering $1.01 trillion for military spending, marking a significant increase from the previous year's budget. This decision reflects both continuity and change in U.S. defense priorities as the administration seeks to enhance military readiness while also pivoting towards new missions, particularly in border security and drug interdiction. On May 2, 2025, the United States Office of Management and Budget (OMB) unveiled the administration's budget proposal, which is characterized as a skinny budget due to its streamlined nature. This proposal comes amidst a broader effort to reshape federal spending, with the administration seeking to cut $163 billion across various government sectors. Notably, while many areas face cuts, defense spending is set to rise by a remarkable 13.4%. A move that has garnered both support and skepticism among lawmakers. While the proposed budget signals a commitment to traditional defense needs such as force readiness and munitions production, it also marks a notable shift by allocating funds for the Pentagon to assist in domestic missions related to border control and drug enforcement. This expansion of the Department of Defense's DoD role in domestic affairs is unprecedented and raises questions about the military's involvement in civilian matters. The proposed budget includes an ambitious reconciliation process, with lawmakers from both the House and Senate Armed Forces Committees advocating for an increase of an additional $150 billion over the next 9 years. This reconciliation is particularly crucial given the Republicans' control over Congress, which may facilitate the passage of the budget despite potential opposition from fiscally conservative lawmakers concerned about sustainability and affordability. Current projections suggest that the proposed budget will represent 3.2% of GDP for FY 2026, surpassing the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's threshold of 3% for defense expenditures. Amidst these discussions, the budget outlines 7 priority areas, including a new generation of missile defense systems known as the Golden Dome. This initiative, announced by Trump on May 20, aims to develop advanced capabilities to detect and intercept missiles, particularly hypersonic threats. The budget also emphasizes naval shipbuilding, seeking to address long-standing challenges in project delivery and infrastructure modernization. Lawmakers have proposed significant funding to bolster shipyard resources, which is essential for meeting the U.S. Navy's future shipbuilding plans. Furthermore, the budget includes provisions for nuclear modernization, with additional funds earmarked to enhance the nuclear enterprise's scientific and production capacities. In line with contemporary threats, there is a renewed focus on increasing the U.S. stockpile of munitions across various platforms alongside investments in next-generation air dominance capabilities. The budget also aligns with the Trump administration's interim national defense strategy, which reportedly prioritizes border security and drug interdiction. This strategic pivot reflects a broader trend within the administration to expand military operations in support of domestic law enforcement agencies, a move that could redefine the military's role within the United States. As Congress deliberates on the proposed budget, concerns about its affordability loom large, particularly in light of economic forecasts predicting a slowdown. The reconciliation process, while offering a pathway to increase funding, will require careful navigation of political sentiments regarding fiscal responsibility and military readiness. In conclusion, President Trump's FY 2026 defense budget encapsulates a complex landscape of continuity and transformation within U.S. defense policy. As the administration seeks to bolster military capabilities while expanding the DoD's domestic mission, the coming months will be crucial in determining how these ambitions reconcile with economic realities and legislative hurdles. The implications of this budget will resonate not only within military circles but also in the broader context of U.S. governance and national security strategy. In recent days, the geopolitical landscape has been marked by diverging strategies and viewpoints within the U.S. administration, particularly concerning the ongoing crises in Ukraine and Venezuela. Tensions are escalating as two prominent figures, Marco Rubio and Richard Grenell, represent contrasting diplomatic approaches under President Donald Trump's leadership, showcasing the complexities of American foreign policy in a rapidly changing world. The situation is particularly precarious in the context of Ukraine, where frustration among European allies is palpable. Trump's recent conversations with Russian President Vladimir Putin have drawn ire and concern, particularly as the U.S. seems increasingly disengaged from its commitments to Ukraine. General Keith Kellogg, a special envoy on Ukraine, has reportedly joked that Trump once claimed he could resolve the Ukraine crisis in 24 hours, though he never clarified which day this would occur. This ambiguous approach is emblematic of a broader uncertainty regarding U.S. strategy in Eastern Europe. During a recent 2-hour phone call, Trump described his discussion with Putin, leading to mixed reactions from European leaders. Accounts of the call suggest that Trump either implied Putin was not interested in peace or that he believed the Russian leader felt he was winning the conflict. Despite earlier optimism from figures like Finnish President Alexander Stubb, who spoke about potential sanctions against Russia, Trump's reticence to impose significant punitive measures has left European leaders feeling despondent. Former U.S. diplomats have urged patience, noting Trump's instincts, which, while erratic, sometimes yield results. A notable perspective details that Trump genuinely seeks a ceasefire and wishes to avoid burdening American taxpayers with what he perceives as a European issue. However, this has raised critical questions about the U.S. commitment to Ukraine and the extent to which Europe can rely on American support moving forward. Compounding these challenges is the growing perception that Trump is increasingly willing to shift the diplomatic focus toward Russia, potentially at the expense of Ukraine's sovereignty. This shift has prompted European leaders to rethink their strategies. Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, articulated the underlying tensions by stating Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. This stark acknowledgement encapsulates the crux of the ongoing geopolitical struggle. Simultaneously, in the context of Venezuela, Rubio has positioned himself against Grenell, whose more conciliatory stance towards both Russia and Venezuela has raised eyebrows. The discord between these two figures illustrates the broader ideological rift within the Trump administration regarding foreign policy priorities. Grenell's approach, which some view as overly accommodating, contrasts sharply with Rubio's staunch advocacy for a more aggressive stance against authoritarian regimes. Their ongoing clash highlights the complexities of U.S. foreign policy, particularly in regions where American interests and values seem at odds. As the U.S. navigates these turbulent waters, European leaders are left grappling with the implications of a potentially diminished U.S. role on the global stage. The possibility of Trump withdrawing support or shifting focus raises critical concerns about the future of NATO and European security. Experts warn that without a cohesive strategy, the transatlantic alliance may struggle to present a united front against Russian aggression, especially as Europe looks to increase its defense spending significantly in response to perceived threats. Looking ahead, the geopolitical implications of these rifts are significant. Should Trump continue on this path, Europe may find itself compelled to enhance its own military capabilities and take the lead in addressing both the Ukrainian crisis and broader security challenges. The notion that Europe could become a more formidable force in countering Russian ambitions is gaining traction, as leaders like Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski argue that the continent's economic strength positions it well to outpace Russia in the long term. In conclusion, as the U.S. navigates its internal conflicts and external pressures, the future of its foreign policy remains uncertain. The contrasting approaches of Rubio and Grenell underscore the complexities of American diplomacy, revealing a landscape where traditional alliances are being tested. For Europe, the call to action is clear: bolster defenses, engage in proactive diplomacy, and prepare for a world where U.S. support may not be as forthcoming as in the past. The unfolding events will undoubtedly shape the contours of international relations for years to come as nations recalibrate their strategies in response to a shifting geopolitical reality.